Hello and welcome to Quit Your Crappy Job, Finding Courage for Positive Change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Quit Your Crappy Job podcast. I'm Jeff Hughes.
And I'm Scott Wilson. And we are very excited to have with us today John Ziegler. Now, John is a comedian, and he's going to walk us through his story and his career. In summary, what is very fascinating, and I hope you all will find very fascinating and interesting, his journey is this is an individual who, wasn't happy in his corporate job. So you do what a lot of us do, you change jobs. And then that turns out wasn't the answer. And so you do what, of course, you see all the infomercials and all the, self-improvement guides and all those things tell you to do. You go start a company. So instead of working for the man, you become the man. And John did that, was very successful at this company and was still miserable. And then decided to take a left turn, quit that business and become a comedian. So we're going to get into this story. But first, John, why don't you give us a little bit of a background about yourself, introduce yourself to our audience, and we'll go to that point.
All right, cool. Thank you, guys. I'm 54 now, and I started comedy at 40. I started right around my 40th birthday. So I had a dozen careers before that. I mean, I was an elementary school teacher. I taught kindergarten and fourth grade. I was a drug counselor, which is weird because I don't drink or do drugs, which is like most people are in recovery. I wasn't even a social drinker, but I worked in a rehab for almost 6 years. I worked for Cablevision out on Long Island. I worked in sales. I worked in the fitness industry for a long time, and I eventually bought my own fitness studio, doing like private training in a very well-off area on Long Island. And there was a few other lesser jobs, sprinkled in there. I did a lot of stuff. And then at 40, I just decided I was going to pursue being a stand-up comic, which is what I wanted to do since I was about 10 years old. And did what I would recommend most people do what I did, which is just sell my business for 10 cents on the dollar and become an open mic comedian. And 14 years later, it's actually my career. I make a living doing it. It's not the world's greatest living, but I'm very happy. And, it worked out for me.
Wow. So you grew up, you said, where did you say you grew up? Long Island?
I grew up on Long Island. Yeah, I grew up in Bethpage, Nassau County, Long Island.
Went to high school, all that stuff.
Went to high school there, lived there. I moved when I was a drunk counselor. I was living up in Rochester, New York, upstate. I was up there for almost 6 years. I lived in San Francisco. I was a .comer for 3 years during the internet boom from like 99. I had so many careers, I don't even remember. Like a 3-year chunk of my life where I lived on the West Coast. I lived in San Francisco for 3 years working for an internet startup company, which was a whole nother culture. Back in like 1980, 98, 99, it was like pretty new, the internet. So I was like on the ground floor of like venture capitalists giving us money and trying everybody getting these golden handcuffs because we're all going public and gonna become millionaires overnight. And I did that I think I was out there for 3 years.
What was your role there? What job did you do?
Jeff, I don't even know what I did. I'm being honest. I was the third employee at the company. And within a year, there was about 75 of us. And we got like $5 million in funding for some venture capitalist fund. And I don't even know. I played on the internet for 8 hours a day. I didn't do anything. I was supposed to be sale. I don't know what I did. I really don't. It was like such a weird time. If you worked in internet, everybody would assume like, well, it's the internet. This has to work. Like anything you did on the internet, they would just thought like this is going to work. And people gave you money. Yeah. I think around 2000, they kind of wake up and start to be like, maybe we should see a business plan before we give you $5 million. And our company ended up going out of business. I worked for another .com after that. And then I moved back to New York. I did not become an internet millionaire. So,
wasn't it like many of us?
Yeah, it was a cool time. Like we had a launch party for our company. We were making no money. We were just spending money. We hired Cirque du Soleil like on a rooftop.
Wow.
To throw a launch party, and everybody came, got a bottle of Cristal.
Wow.
So If that helps you understand why we went out of business in a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were like hundreds of other .com
Yeah.
startups, doing the same thing or doing nothing, I guess.
Yeah. And so the running joke with me when I left the company were like, John, we're going to miss whatever you do here. Whatever that is, we don't really know what you do. I'm like, I'm number 3.
Employee number 3. That was my job.
That was my job. I was just employee number 3. I just literally took 2-hour lunches. My office was across the street from where the San Francisco Giants played.
Okay.
Nice. I know that area.
Yeah,
it's
you're in the
called
south part.
Yeah, south of Market, they call it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so on lunch, I would buy like $8 bleacher seats and go see the Giants. This was when Bonds was on the team.
Nice.
And we would take like 2.5-hour lunches and just watch the ball game. It was dramatically overpaid. It was a good time.
That's a good stadium, actually, isn't it?
It was beautiful. Yeah, right on the water.
Yeah.
Can be cold. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah, I remember that whole startup time period. I remember, people just throwing money. One of the startups I worked with, John, I think you'll relate based on what you just said. We were in business. We'd been in business like 6-9 months, and seat of the pants on fire. We're going like crazy, and growing really fast. We went from just like 12 employees to however many there were at that point. Big server farm. I mean, just going crazy. And I'd gotten to know the CFO that we'd hired from some consulting agency. I'll have to tell you off camera another story about this guy. He was hilarious. Him and his affinity for hot wings. But anyways, I come in and he's just frantically, and he just says, "Shut the door. I got to hurry and knock this out." But yeah, I got time to talk. So I sit there and I'm like, it doesn't look like you have time to talk. What are you doing? "Oh, I'm just trying to hurry and write up our business plan before these investors come in here." And I was like, what do you mean, we don't have a business plan? And he stopped and looked at me. "No, we didn't have a business plan. I didn't know that when I joined this company. I'll never make that mistake again."
I think that was most of the companies at that time.
And I was like, "Well, what are you writing down?" "I'm just making stuff up." I was like, man, we're in trouble. And we were. It didn't go very well. But
I moved back to New York. I think it was 2001. It was like a couple of months before 9/11. So whatever. Yeah. So the summer before 9/11. And I worked back in fitness for many, many years. And then I bought my own studio. And I really thought my money was invested now. I had all my money invested in this fitness studio. We bought it in a town called Port Washington, Long Island. It's the Sands Point Manhattan. They're very wealthy towns. I had a celebrity clientele. And I'm like, I guess this is what I am now. Like, I guess I own a fitness studio. Like, this is it. And I tried to have peace with that. Like, give up that fantasy dream I had for 25 years of just being a comic. Like, I lived in this delusional world where I still believed that I was going to be some famous comedian, even though I've never been on a stage. Like, that's how. So I just woke up one day very unhappy. Like, I hated going to work. I worked long days. I had partners. I liked being a business owner. I was good at it. I did not like having partners. That was the problem. I had one partner that if I could have murdered him and gotten away with it, I probably would have considered it. And I decided to do an open mic. So for people who don't know how this works, you basically just call up a comedy club and go, "Yes, I'd like to do your open mic." And they go, "You have to bring 6 paying customers." And you get to go on stage. Yeah, that's how it works. They're called bringer shows. You bring 6 people. They have to buy tickets and 2 drinks. And you get to be on the show on like a new talent night.
Yeah.
And that was my first. I called Governor's Comedy Club on Long Island, which is like the club on Long Island for 40 years. And I went on record. I knew I can back out still. So I ended up calling everybody I knew and telling them that I'm doing it. So I was on record. And then I did my first open mic in 2009, something like that.
Yeah.
And my first day in the comedy club, I was like, "This is what I want to do."
First day.
Do what? First day. I'm like, "This is what
getting up there. Rough jokes.
Before I even got on stage, there's a smell of the wood, the carpet, there's a feel of the club, the shitty, ugly green rooms. There was a whole feel to it. And it was like living my dream. It's like, look, I'm a sports fan. I'm a Yankee fan. This was walking on the field at Yankee Stadium.
Wow.
That's what it felt like. Like, you know what I mean? Like you just like, this is what I can't believe I'm standing where, at shortstop where Jeter played. Like, that's what it felt like. Governors is a pretty well, like Jerry Seinfeld played there, Eddie Murphy. Like it's a lot of comics came off Long Island. Like the list is
right.
Unbelievable how many comics. Rodney Dangerfield's from Long Island. Lenny Bruce is from Long Island. I mean, Kevin James, Ray Romano, they're all Long Island. Even currently, Amy Schumer and David Tell, they're all Long Island people. So there's a history there. And I kind of felt that when I sat in the club.
That's cool.
And yeah, I didn't go from, I like this, I'm quitting my job. But it didn't take me too long to go to, I like this, I'm quitting my job. I'd say within 3 or 4 months of just doing a couple of open mics, I'm like, I got to figure out how to get out of this business. And
how did your first night go? Did you get laughs or was it?
Yeah, so I had a clipboard, which is not like, you don't see comics go up there and like flip through pages, but I had a clipboard and I put it on the bar stool and I did well because I was very prepared. I'm very like, it's just my personality. I'm very OCD. I didn't go into it like cocky. I was petrified of public speaking, like petrified, not nervous, like a different level. Like my legs were weak, my stomach would be nauseous. And I didn't like to make eye contact with the audience. I would just kind of look down like this. And but my jokes were pretty good for first time doing comedy. I mean, if I was to watch that tape now, I'd probably cringe, but I did okay. It was emotionally exhausting. Like I got off stage, I'm like, how do people do this for a living? I feel like I ran a marathon. Like it takes so much energy. The nerves would start at 9 in the morning and the show's at 8 at night.
Wow.
So by the time you get to the show, you're like, I just want to get this over with. But then it's a high and I couldn't wait to get back next time. So there's 2 different ways you can start comedy. There's these bringer shows where you go to a club and you bring 6 people. Or there's just a traditional open mic where you show up at a coffee shop and you sign your name. Anybody can do that. You guys can do that. You can just show up, sign your name, and go do stand-up.
Right.
But those you're performing mostly to either people eating wings, watching the ball game, who don't want you talking, or 10 other comics who are on their phones waiting for their turn to get up. So they're pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Those are your options when you start. I was afraid of those.
Yeah.
I just did the bringer shows at the club because they felt like a real show. There was actual audience. You're at a comedy club. So I did those for the first 4 or 5 months. I would go to those other open mics and I'd go, yeah, maybe next time. I don't think so. And I don't know what the trigger was that pushed me, but I just knew I had to leap and go finally be happy after all these careers for 25 years. That was soul sucking. That's the best word for it. They just sucked the life out of me. I hated going to work. I hated the commute. My favorite part of a job was quitting it. Like I would feel good for there was like a 3-hour window after I quit a job and I would drive home. I'd be like, free. And then you get home and the reality starts to settle in of, I have rent due in 8 days. The hell did I do? But there's a small time where it's just so liberating. When I quit my business, when I sold my business, I didn't have a plan. I was just like, I'm going to be a comic. And I sold my business. That was it.
Wow. And at that point, how many shows had you done? These bringer shows?
Oh, like 4, 5.
4.
Oh my.
Yeah, like something like insignificant amount. I just knew I wanted to really try it. And being a business owner, I work 7 days a week. Some of my days were 11, 12-hour days.
Right.
So I ended up having to make some kind of a plan because I have to eat and pay rent. So when I sold my business, I sold it for a fraction of what it was worth. It wasn't a negotiation. Like I walked in, I was like, guys, I'm selling the business. This is what I want. And it was beyond reasonable because I didn't want to go through a negotiation and get lawyers and all that other crap. I was just like, it's like a bad marriage.
Especially with your favorite partner, it sounds like.
He's my favorite partner. Yeah. It was just kind of like, here's one of my partners is cool. I still talk to him to this day. He's a good guy. It was just one of these things of like, if you're in a bad marriage, you're like, you take the house. I don't care. I just want out. That's kind of what it was. I'm like, you can have half my 401k. I'm done. I'll see the kids on weekends. Like, that was kind of my exit strategy. And then I ended up working as a consultant for them for like, close to a year. I got a salary every week to come in because they didn't know how to run I ran the business.
Right.
They were trainers. They didn't want to know about that. They didn't know where the checkbook was.
Right.
So I did all the marketing, advertising, sales, scheduling, balanced the checkbook, paid the bill. I did all the business aspects of it. So I kind of taught them what to do. And after a year, I filtered out. And then I just dove into work like my life depended on it. Like I was every night in New York City. I was somewhere every night doing comedy.
Wow.
Yeah, every night.
Did you do new material every week, or did you sort of recycle material? I guess at different clubs you could do that.
Most people, you work on an act. So this myth with comedy, people think like every time you go up, you have a new 10 minutes. It takes a long, long time to write a good 10 minutes.
Yeah.
When I say a long time for a new comic, that's about a year.
Oh,
It takes about a year to come up with 10 minutes. So like the build an act, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. A headliner does about 45. In the beginning, you're trying to get that 7-minute set so that you can do a spot at a club and do a 7-minute guest spot. So I would do my acts, the stuff that worked. And then every now and then you try to sandwich in, they call it like a new bit. Mm-hmm. You try to grow it. But again, I was very meticulous. Like I wrote every day. I was like, videotaping my sets back then. We didn't have phones really. It wasn't that commonplace. It wasn't like today. I had what's called it was such a great invention. I just threw mine out. Oh my God, the technology just played. It's called a flip video. It's this little thing about this big with a USB port. You can plug it right into your computer, but it videotaped. And so I bought one of those. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And then 12 months later, people were just setting their phones up on tripods. I'm like, oh, that was a waste of money. So I tape my sets.
That's part of the work you did then. You were recording yourself, watching yourself? Yeah,
watch my sets back every night, critique them, figure out what I can do better, listen to the words. I had really good, I guess call them mentors. I met some really good guys in comedy that were way more advanced than me. Like my friend, I used to model myself after. His name is Joe DeVito. He's now the head writer for Gutfeld. It's the #1 late night show.
Yeah.
And he's on air. He's in the sketches all the time. Like Joe is the guy 6 years in that was already on like Craig Ferguson. He was on Panel and Chelsea lately. He was up in Montreal. Like he had stuff going on. He was like 6 years into comedy. But I would watch the way he worked. He was a finalist on Last Comic Standing, like top 30, top 25, whatever he made. And I had the booker of Governor's Comedy Club, this guy named John, who's been in the business for like 40 years. He was a comic for many years. Then he became a club manager and booker. And he just gave me great advice. So I was lucky to have people who steered me in the right direction, because I see a lot of new comics now and they just don't know what they're doing. They have in their head what they think comedy is. And they're just running around wasting their time. In a way, they're kind of spinning their wheels. It helps to have a little guidance.
Right.
It would be like playing golf. It would be like playing golf and nobody ever told you how to swing a club. You just go out there and bang golf balls for 12 hours. Like you'll get a little better, but a lesson or two might really go a long way.
Right.
Sure.
So I had a couple of good guys help me out. So
going back just to the first show, the Bringer show, I guess as you call it, do they invite you back at that point, or do you just keep coming back with 6 people each time?
They invite you back if you have 6 more friends.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a way for the club to have an audience and make money.
Uh-huh.
Like nobody cares about a guy who's done 2 shows.
Yeah.
There are people who think that there are comics who start. They're like, I did a 6-person Bringer my first show. I got a lot of laughs. You think the club will feature me here on the weekend? And I'm like, it's not how this works. Like you have to do that like 1,000 times. Like it takes years before you're ready to, really work at a club as a professional comedian. So I think I did it quicker than other people. Like I was hosting at the club, the MC. I was doing that on weekends from money after about under 2 years.
So, So is that like the next step, or what's the next step after you do the Bringer shows? How does that progress?
It gets progressed. It's a very referral based business. So you meet other comics who are more successful than you. And they're like, I've been watching this guy, John Ziegler. He's a nice guy. He shows up on time. keeps his mouth shut, does okay on stage. Like doing okay on stage is almost like tertiary. It's almost like the third thing they care about. They're like, he doesn't bother me and he shows up on time. And then
Is
he
that a
does.
problem?
Oh yeah. Professionalism is a problem. Yeah, people who can't seem to show up on time, or people who just, they want to be in the business so bad. You're sitting in the green room and they're like running bits by you and telling jokes and they're always on. And you're like, dude, you're exhausting me. Just be quiet.
Yeah.
And show
so
up.
I tried to show up. I would just sit there quietly. I was always prepared. I tried not, to bother the headliners. And I started to get some work. And the next step is referrals, guys like, and I'll name drop the Long Island guys that helped me out, were like a guy named Joe Starr, who was around for years, Joey Cola, who's got a really nice career. Joey was very nice to me, Chris Monti, Joe DeVito. All those guys would use me as like a 10-minute opener. So I started to get workplaces. And then your goal is, once they get your foot in the doors, for you to shine. And then the club goes, oh, that guy you brought, he was good. I'll have him back. So it's a process. You go from like a guy who does spots. You do like 7 minutes on a Thursday or a Sunday night where they have fundraisers. And then you get a weekend where you get the host. And then the next progression is what they call a feature. That's the guy who opens for the headliner. You do about 25 minutes. So my first feature weekend was Jim Brewer, who's, Saturday Night Live and, got a huge career. I called the booker of the club. Eventually I had to get a day job. So I was working for New York Sport Club. I was a fitness director at New York Sport Club. I did that for like a year. And then I quit one day. Same thing. I just woke up one day and go, I don't want to do this shit anymore. I quit, and I had the good drive home, that hour in between. I was like, this is great. I'm a comic. And then you get to, like exit 44 and you're like, I got rent due. Like the panic starts to set in. So I called the booker of the club and he goes, so you want to be, I told him I quit. And he goes, you want to be a feature comic? And I said, yeah. And he said, this weekend, Jim Brewer, 5 sold out shows. Don't screw it up. And he hung up on me. And I said, all right, I guess I'm open for Jim Brewer. And that was my first feature weekend where I got to actually be that was kind of cool. But then I featured for probably 4 years before I took the next step, which is headlining. I guess about year 8, I got my first headlining spot, which was pretty cool. That's where you get to go.
Is that where they advertise your upcoming show? And
headline is the guy, like I'd be on like the local news. I'd be in the news, New York Newsday, it'd be like promoting me. You're on the website. People are coming to see you.
Right.
Feature acts and MCs don't get advertised usually.
Yeah.
Like if you see Sebastian Maniscalco at the club, it just says Sebastian Maniscalco. It doesn't tell you who his openers are. Nobody cares.
Right.
So that was the progression.
That's a lot of years. A lot of work.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where you find your humor. Is it just in daily life, or observing other people? Comics usually have a source that they go
there's different styles. Everybody has a different style of comedy. Like Rodney Dangerfield is just a joke writer.
Right.
He has this persona and character, and he writes jokes, and he's amazing at it. It's very different than what I do. Then you got guys like Seinfeld, who are like what they call observational comics.
Right.
So like, you ever notice? Like he's got kind of that stuff. And it's usually very clean and very wholesome, but it's very well written. And then you have the guys that I look up to, that I admire. Not that I don't love those guys, but it's the more current, like the Louis C.K.'s, the Bill Burrs, guys like that who are very real life. Like Chris Rock was doing that 25 years ago, and it was brilliant.
Right. Jim Gaffigan, I think, would fall in that category.
He's a very observational. Like Jim Gaffigan could talk about bacon for 10 minutes.
That's right.
And it just doesn't stop. It's just like, how did he mine so much jokes out of hotel pools or hot pockets or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, he's talented.
Very talented. Brian Regan's one of the guys who falls in that category. But I like the guys like, and I'm not an edgy comic. It's just not my style. I like talking about real things. But it's not always easy to talk about those topics. You have to figure, you have to get better at comedy. It's hard 3 years in. Like I do a lot of, my mother had Alzheimer's and I was her caretaker for 5 years. I have a lot of jokes about that. But when
Right.
you're not good, you can't just come out and be like, so my mother has Alzheimer's. People are like, ooh, that's terrible. They feel
Right.
bad for you. You have to be good enough to know how to talk about it. That's why I admire guys
Right.
like Burr and Louie. And right now it's a guy
tough.
named, it's very hard. Like to use my personal example, what I'm doing this year. I've told you, Scott, but we haven't talked about it on here, but I got diagnosed with, I got pancreatic cancer in April. So it's been a year. I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and it was 6 months of chemo, 3 surgeries, one of them a major surgery. And I do 25 minutes on stage about that. And when I wanted to talk about it, I'm like, can I talk about this? Like, are people going to feel bad for me? Are they going to be uncomfortable? Everybody knows somebody with cancer, or 4 people. Well, everybody knows 4 people with cancer. So I'm like, it's going to hit home with a lot of people. And I gave it some thought. And I'm like, I'm not making fun of cancer. I'm talking about my situation. And I do it. And I still get a couple of ahs and a couple of groans, but small. Right. Most people, find it funny, and they respect the fact that I can laugh about it and be honest. Right. What are you going to do? So I'm taping a special in May 21st. So it's coming up less than a month. And I called it Getting My Affairs in Order. That's the name of my special. Because when I was in the hospital and I found out what I had, if you know anything about pancreatic cancer, it's not the I'm cutting a mole off my arm kind of cancer. Like it's pretty bad. And I thought this was it. And the first thing I thought was I have to make this call to my girlfriend. How do you make that phone call? And the second thought was I need to record a special, because for me, that's my legacy. Like comedy is like I love comedy. And I'm obsessed with it. So I wanted to leave behind, if I didn't make it, I wanted to leave something behind. So that's how much I like comedy. When I was told what I had, I was like, I got to shoot a special with tubes sticking out of me. And I was able to make that happen. I got an excellent production team who's shooting it. I'm shooting it at Governor's Comedy Club, which is where I wanted to shoot it, because that's where I started comedy. That first show with the clipboard 14 years ago was at Governor's. And that's been my home clubs. And that's where most of my friends are from. I call regular people who don't do comedy civilians. I don't really socialize with too many regular people anymore. My whole network are comedians. Except for my girlfriend and my family, almost everybody's a comic.
And that sounds like a progression too, right? As you progressed, your circle changed.
Yeah, one of the fun things about doing comedy, it's the diner hang after shows. Like, we all have egos, we all want more. We all have things to say about other comics, but if you're professional, you just do your job. But then you go to the diner with 2 guys, and then you bitch and, talk about other people. That's where you go. Yeah. The diner hang's a lot of fun. And that becomes your friends, because you all have a commonality. You've all done 4-hour drives to Connecticut on a Friday night to do a $20 spot. And only people who have done that kind of understand. So I'll be on the phone for hours with comedians, and then like my girlfriend will call me and it's like a 2-minute conversation. I'm like, all right, gotta go. Like, this is different.
Yeah. Hey, John, can you take us back for a second, just to take a step back to that first show? I thought the juxtaposition, the paradox between you being so terrified of public speaking and actually doing it. I mean, I just can't help but wonder what made you push through that, because most people I know who are that afraid of public speaking just don't do it, because it's like, oh no, I'll faint, all the things you talked about, but yet you went through that. I think that kind of speaks to something about you, or your desire, or what you want. I just want to try to understand what really made you push through such a big fear like that.
It was a huge turning point, because again, I was 40 years old.
Right.
And I daydreamed about being a comic for 25 years, literally. Right. So I thought about it every day. It's a weird psychosis to just be like working in some job every day, like, I'm going to be a comedian. I'm like, you're out of your mind. Like, what do you feel like? You're delusional. Like, I was literally a little delusional. I think it came with when I owned my business. I actually thought this through and was like, someday I'm going to be 65, 70 years old. And it's going to really suck to look back on my life and realize that I allowed fear to run my life, that I didn't do the things I wanted to do, that I stayed in some job that was unfulfilling and didn't make me feel very good about myself. I thought making money would make me feel good about myself. So I made a nice living when I owned my fitness studio. I was eating at steakhouses every night, and I was People ask me what I did, and I'd be like, "I'm in Junction Fitness," and like, "Oh, you own that?" And I thought it would give me self-worth,
Yeah.
and it really didn't. It did on a fake, superficial way, but I didn't feel good about myself. So you do get to a point in life where you get tired of fear running your life, and it's either, just jump or don't. Like, what's it going to be already? You're 40. So I knew I had to do it, or I was going to be regretful. And that never came to fruition more than I was laying in a hospital bed, pretty sure I was dying. And I had kind of peace about my life. I wasn't I didn't look back like, why me? Or I was like, you know what? I got to do what I wanted to do with my life. All the people I grew up watching on Comedy Central or David Letterman or listening to Opie and Anthony or Howard Stern, like I worked with a lot of them. I was friendly with some of them. It was kind of like I actually lived my dream. So not that I was like ready to check out, but if I had to, I didn't have any regret. I had no bucket list. I wasn't like, I have to see Italy. I'm like, nah.
Wow.
I did what I wanted. I'm good. Except for the special.
I mean, that's, to me, that this whole thing is incredible to start at 40. I think most people who are 40 would say, well, this is my lot in life. I'll just keep slugging it out day after day.
I agree.
How do you, or what would you recommend to somebody who's in a similar predicament? Just jump and do it? Or?
Well, it's true. Look, I was 40, but I wasn't married. I don't have kids. I rent an apartment. I lease a car. I had very little of the adult responsibilities. There is a reality to life. If you're married with 2 kids and a mortgage, you can't just quit your job.
Yeah.
Working as a vice president at Cablevision or whatever you do.
Yeah.
Because you want to be a comic. It's not realistic. You have responsibilities. So I think my advice to people is it's not as complicated to start. Like I always thought, like, I'm going to be a comic. Like, how do you do this? I thought it was this big. It was as simple as picking up a phone, calling Governor's Comedy Club and go, "Hi, I'd like to sign up for your open mic." And then the lady Carol, who's worked in the office, I think they put the building around her. She's been there for so long, Carol. Carol just said, "You got to bring 6 people, show up at 7:00. And I'm like, and I hung up the phone and I go, "That's it? That took me 25 years. You have to start. You just have to start." Now, it doesn't have to be, I own a business tomorrow. I want to be a famous comedian. It's just not going to, it has to be like, well, what can I do that kind of fulfills me and makes me happy? And even if it's not going to be my career, even if it's just going to be a side thing or a hobby or a passion, it does kind of, gives you something that your mundane job doesn't do. I describe the comedy club like, I'm not religious. I'm kind of an atheist. When I got sick, I tried it because just covering my ass just in case I'm wrong. The other 8 billion, just in case the other 8 billion people are right and I'm the one who's wrong. Like, I guess I might want to say a couple of prayers. You never know.
Right.
I hear people talk about church when they go there, and it gives them like a peace, and that's their place they go, and it's like that's what a comedy club felt like. I would work 11, 12 hours, drive right to Governor's, and they would allow me, because I took a comedy class at Governor's. Since I was part of the class, they would allow me to watch the shows for free and sit in the back of the room. So I would come in and just go to the back of the room and didn't worry about anything. I was just so happy to be around that. So I guess my advice to people is just start. You can't think. If I logically thought about what I was doing, okay, I'm leaving my job where I make a 6-figure salary, and I'm going to go be a comedian, which I have paralyzing stage fright, and I've never done it. And you make zero money for about 3 years. If I thought it through like that, I would have had a nervous breakdown and probably never made this. I was just like, I have money in the bank. I'm going to work here as a consultant for a year. Let me just go do it for me.
Yeah.
And I'll worry about the rest. I'll worry about that bridge when I come to it. I can't overthink it. But after 20 years of being unhappy, I mean, how much more am I going to, the older you get, the harder it becomes. It's just a reality.
John, you're kind of hitting on, I think, something very profound. You talked about this peace, like a church or something, but it sounds like the real peace you had, like, and you actually said this, that you kind of found you. Mark Twain, what you said brings to mind a great quote from Mark Twain. You said that there are two important dates in your life. The first is when you were born, and the second is knowing why. And it sounds like when you became a comic and you're now faced with death, right? Pancreatic cancer is usually, that's it. I had an uncle who died from it. I mean, it's a very low survival rate, and you're faced with this end, and yet you had peace looking back that you had basically found your why. Am I correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, no, you summed it up pretty good. That's really what it is. Like, you don't want to have regret. Regret's a horrible thing. So I'm so happy. Comedy, it wasn't just about doing comedy. It changed me as a person. Like, I have you can't see it here, but on my arm, you can see this giant. It's my
I love it.
Comedy tattoo stage, which all the comics, I used to do a podcast on iHeartRadio called it was called Full Frontal Radio. And me and three other comics. And when I got this, I went on the radio show and I showed the other comics, and we did an hour and 20 minutes that day of just them making fun of my tattoo. That was the whole radio show. But I didn't get this to be like, look, I'm a comic. I got it because it just literally, comedy changed my life. I became a more confident person. I became a more assertive person. I was happier. I had a focus. I had some bouts of depression when I was younger. I don't think I've had a real severe bout of depression since I started comedy. I mean, taking care of my mother and stuff, but that's a normal depression. That's a reaction to something bad happening in your life. To give an example, I did jiu-jitsu. I started 5 years ago, and I'm not an alpha guy. I was an athlete. I'm pretty fit. I was worked out, but going to jiu-jitsu, it's like, that's out of my comfort zone. It's a bunch of dudes with shaved heads and cauliflowered ears. And I walked in. Before I did comedy, I would have quit. I would have done jiu-jitsu for 2 weeks and go, I don't know, because I was uncomfortable there.
Right.
Comedy made me able to sit in jiu-jitsu and be uncomfortable, because I knew, like, you just have to keep. I wasn't comfortable when I did comedy, and now I headline and I tour around the country. It's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. I was like, just stick with it, and you'll be one day.
Sorry, the stage fright is gone now.
Oh yeah, I have zero.
That's awesome.
I don't remember the last time I've been nervous on a stage. Like, I can literally walk into a crowded restaurant. If they handed me a microphone, I can bang on a glass and just do stand up. Like, I don't care who's watching. I don't care if I'm bombing. I don't care. It took a long time to get there, but that's the progression of comedy. You just, the longer you do it. I mean, I've seen some comics and some very awkward. I'm like, oh, I would want to be doing comedy there. Like hosting an award show or some terrible, you're at a place. Like, I know a girl, I don't know her very well. I've opened for her a few times. She's a comic. She's very attractive, but she hosted what's called the Adult Video Awards or something, AVAs. They're in Vegas. It's basically the porn awards. Yeah. And I'm like, I can't imagine a worse gig. And I watched them. They were on Showtime, and I went and watched them to see her host it. And she's like trying to do her act. Oh. And, they do cutaways of the audience, and they usually see people doing this in the audience, and they would cut away. It would just be like two girls with piercings, like making out. I'm like, oh, this is the worst.
The worst.
The worst. And she's just, what do you do? So, like, I wouldn't want to do that. And that would probably make me nervous, because you're in front of, that would make me nervous. But just doing regular stand-up, no, I'm very happy that I don't even understand the fear I used to have. It's not, at this point, it's not rational. Yeah. Like, I was so afraid for so long at the thought of it. And now I'm like, what was I afraid? I don't remember. Like, why was I afraid? It doesn't make sense to me.
So it sounds like that's just not the progression of you and your field. It's just a progression of you.
Yeah. Right? You grow as a person. You grow as a person. Look, I've started comedy 14 years ago, and I ran the New Talent Night on Long Island for about 7 years, which is like those bringer shows that I told you about. I used to do them, and then I ended up running them. And that was kind of cool. But I got to see every new comic who was starting out. And everybody had my phone number. I would talk about comedy to anybody. I'd talk to a homeless guy on the street for 2 hours about stand-up. Like, it's just what I like to do. And like, I remember, like, most of those people who were all going to be famous, every one of them. There's like 4 guys since I've started who are still doing comedy that started after me.
You talked about how you always wanted to be a comic for 20 some odd years. That kind of makes me think, despite, and I mean, you said that you didn't have the typical things, right? The house, the mortgage, the wife, the kids, all those things when you made the jump, but it sounds like there were a lot of preparatory steps though. I mean, if you had this dream for 20 some odd years before you hit 40, I mean, were you writing jokes at all? Were you thinking up material? Were you ever the jokester in the office? Anything where you were trying that kind of stuff out in your
Not
head at
really.
least? Or
No, I
wow,
mean, I watched a lot of stand-up. Like I started watching stand-up. I'm 54, so I don't know how old you guys are, but I was used to watch Carson in the mid 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a big thing. My dad would wake, depending on who the guest was, my father would actually wake me up.
oh
Like
really?
if it was Rodney Dangerfield, if it was Buddy Hackett, there was a few guys that my father would wake me up, and I can go in the living room and watch the stand-up, and then I have to go back to bed. So it was a family thing. Me and my dad bonded over stand-up comedy.
Wow.
And it was really cool because my dad passed away in 1996, so way before I ever did stand-up.
Mm.
And I remember years later, I opened for Robert Klein. He's kind of a legend in comedy. I did a bunch of shows with Robert Klein. And I was like, if my father, he would never believe, like I watched Robert Klein's HBO specials with my father.
Oh.
He had 10 or 11 of them. He was like the first HBO special ever was Robert Klein.
Wow.
So it was just a cool thing. Robert Klein came out on stage the first time I opened for him. I brought him out and he came out and he grabbed me and he dipped me and he put his hand over my mouth and tried to give me it was like a big fake kiss.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know he was going to do it. He just literally dipped me and kissed me. And I walked off stage and I'm like, my father never would have believed. It was a very cool feeling.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, so like, that's what I mean. I got to do this. And there's a lot of those stories of people I got to meet that I grew up watching. If you remember the 80s, they used to have the Rodney Dangerfield Young Comedian specials that launched Dice and Kinnison and Roseanne Barr. And I mean, they all came off of that special.
Mm-hmm.
I was obsessed with it. So I always had an eye for comedy, but I never wrote jokes. I just,
Wow.
I knew I could.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It's just fascinating that you could just, jump into that at 40, never having done it, or not doing anything preparatory to leading up to that. It is remarkable. I had another question about what does comedy do for you when you're up on stage? Is it connecting with a few people and making them laugh? What gives you the satisfaction when you're performing, and so much so that you want to do it over and over again? What is that feeling that you get?
Some people think, I hear people talk about comics all the time, like they're dark people and they're very depressed. I go, nah, I worked in a cubicle. Those people were really depressed. It's not more so with comedy. So I never agree with that, because you do hear about, suicides with comics, and you hear about Robin Williams. I'm like, well, he had Lewy body dementia. Like, he wasn't just a guy who, there was reasons that things like that happened. For me, it's just that challenge. It's not, I have a hole inside of me and I need the laughter to feel good about myself. My parents didn't love me, so I need the approval of strangers. Like, people get a little deep with it. I love that. It's a craft. It's no different than somebody who dances. It's very choreographed. You write, you got to run those bits over and over and over again. It's not what most people think. People think somebody like Robin Williams gets on stage and he just rips for 20 minutes. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He worked very hard on that act. It just looks like it's made up on the spot because he's good at what he does.
Yeah.
So I don't know what, but I'm never, even when I was sick, like the clubs out here, the governors clubs, when I was going through chemotherapy, I couldn't book shows. I didn't know how I was going to feel. I was very sick, but I'd have some good days. I'd have some weeks where it didn't hit me so hard, and I would just call the club and they'd let me come down and do spots. Like, they rolled out the red carpet for me. And I would go down and, they're short, the 10, 15-minute spots. I never was sick on stage. That takes my mind off everything. So whenever I got on stage, I can walk like this to the club, go on stage and be perfectly fine for 15 minutes, then come off stage. And
wow.
It was really, there's a real high to it. And there's also this, it's like walking a tightrope without a net. You have to try new material, and new material often doesn't go well for the best of comics.
Yeah.
And there's something about being able to go up there and taking that risk. It still gives me that rush that it did 14 years ago. Doing my act, I know what my act is.
Yeah.
And it gets laughs 95% of the time. I mean, it does well. So that's not the same. I could do that and be thinking about a grocery list in my head while I'm saying it. Like, it's not that difficult to do my act. I've done 1,000 times. But new bits, it's a really rewarding feeling when you write something and then bring it to a club that night and it does well. It's a cool feeling.
Yeah.
So, John, what about this? So, in my career, and I think, Jeff, you too, done a lot of public speaking and then been in front of crowds, not writing jokes. It's obviously scripted, right? Business presentation, whatever. But I've always been able to tell if I need to get off the stage because this is not hitting it with the audience, or we can hit the full whatever time I've got allotted, right? As a comedian, is it something similar? Do you get up there and like, yeah they booked me for an hour, but I'm out of here in 40? Or do you go,
no,
hey,
I gotta do
an hour and 10? Is there anything like that?
I gotta do my time.
Okay.
So if I'm contractually being hired to do 45 minutes, I do 45 minutes. But sometimes you're at a club and they're like, do 45, and if it's going well, like there's only one show tonight, like have fun. You read the audience. There are comics who are a little self-indulgent, where they did 45 and didn't go well, and they're up there an hour and 15 minutes. And I'm like, dude, get off the stage. Like you're holding these people hostage. They want to go home.
Yeah.
Stop, but you're not doing well.
Right.
So you can read the room. Like I just did about 3 weeks ago, I was in Indianapolis. And I got there on a Friday, did the Friday night show. And then after the show, I got the flu. I'm talking like bedridden, 102 temperature, sweats, chills. Saturday night, I had to do a show. So I went to the club and just tried to power through it. And I did fine. Again, when I got on the stage for the 45 minutes, miraculously, you don't feel it. But then they couldn't get the drinks out fast enough. So they were like, this is stretch. They're like, do another 10, do 10 more. I'm like, oh. So I did 55. And then they were like, I ended up doing an hour 15 with the flu.
Wow.
And then as soon as you get off, you do it, you're fine. Then you get off stage and your legs turn to rubber and you want to collapse. And it's like, I guess like running a marathon. As soon as you cross the finish line, these people just ran 26 miles and they cross and collapse.
Right.
So you do what you got to do, but yes, same thing. Read the room. You know when you're bombing. Don't hold those poor people. Don't make those people sit there long. Those poor people go home.
Poor people.
I've sat through many a tech presentation, boring tech presentation, and I've given a number of boring tech presentations.
Right.
One other question I had for you was around: is there something? How far along are you in terms of accomplishing your goals? Do you have certain things that you still want to accomplish? Is it a TV special? Is it, or you're doing great right now and this is, you've reached your pinnacle? Tell us where you want to go.
I keep the same mindset from when I started, which is just work hard, try to be funny, do the best you can on stage. And some things I can't control. Early on in my career, the first year, 2 years, those bringer shows, the open mics, you get to MC. The career path is a lot easier because you have a lot more control. Like if you're an MC and you want to be a middle act, well, just keep writing, keep getting better, and you'll be a middle act. If you're a middle act and you want to move up to a headliner, keep writing, keep working, eventually you'll headline. Once you become that headliner who's playing these B rooms, the next step becomes harder because that's when you need sometimes management or an agent who can submit you for a late night spots or pitch you to Comedy Central or Last Comic Standing or get you booked in rooms you couldn't get into. Me on my own, it's very hard for me to get into certain places without having an industry head who has connections there. So it gets harder, but I can't control that. So again, I just try to be good and do what I got to do. My goals, I don't care about being on a sitcom. I don't like most of them anyway. I mean, I'd love to be on like Curb Your Enthusiasm. That would be cool. But I don't care about being on Big Bang Theory. I know it's the number one show it's off the air now, but was like the number one sitcom for 10 years, but not to me, it wasn't.
Do you want to be on any talk shows, late night or anything like that? Yeah,
my goal is to do something that gives me exposure so that I can sell tickets, because that's what it comes down to. If you can sell tickets, you can work. If you can sell 4,000 tickets, you can play the Beacon Theater. If you can sell 5,000 tickets, you can play Radio City Music Hall. It doesn't matter. Like, you have to be able to sell tickets. So I don't want to do it for money. Yeah, I'd like to make more money than I make now. And I don't care about fame. I would like to have a career like a guy like Brian Regan, who doesn't really do a lot of television. He plays 5,000 seaters.
Yeah.
And he just tours, because I love doing stand-up. But it's very hard to get famous strictly on stand-up. If you look at the people who are selling out, a lot of them have a huge social media following now.
Yeah.
They're huge on Instagram. They use on TikTok. They have a successful podcast. Podcasting is huge. I started with a guy named Tim Dillon. Friendly, nice guy, good guy, Tim. He's behind Rogan right now in terms of like the most successful podcast, just the Tim Dillon show. And he's makes a fortune on his podcast, but now he's selling out 2,000-3,000 seaters like nothing. And it's all, it all came from his podcast. Now he is a guy who worked really hard and is a good stand-up. So he can go and do an hour at a theater. There are people who blow up on TikTok or something, but they've never really done stand-up. And then they book a room to do an hour. And I'm like, this is going to be interesting. They have an 8-second TikTok video. What are they going to do for the next 60 minutes?
Yeah.
So the business has changed a lot in terms of what social media has created. When I started, there was no TikTok. There was no Instagram.
Right.
I mean, it just wasn't like social media was there, but it wasn't the way people made it. Now it kind of is. Like, you almost have to have a social media presence, which I'm doing, because it took me 6 hours just to log into this morning. I've started trying to get onto the show at about 7 a.m. And I was talking to Scott, and I'm like, I'm going to throw my iPad through the wall. Like, I can't log on to anything. My operating system is from 2004. I don't know how to update it. I can't get the apps on. I'm like, I just get frustrated. I'm very bad at this stuff. And I have no interest in doing Instagram or TikTok or any of that stuff. But you kind of need it. I kind of dug my heels in, where I'm like, I'm not assimilating. This is it. It's not a good thing. Like, I should be doing this. So my goals are, I'm going to do this special May 21st. We're going to pitch it some places. Hopefully somebody wants it. And if not, it's going up on YouTube. I'm going to cut it up into clips, and hopefully people like it. And
talk about the special, John. I mean, what exactly is it covering specifically?
Well, I wanted to do kind of a greatest hits thing, if you understand what I mean. Like, this is it. So it's like, I'm not doing new jokes. So I'm going to do what I think are my best jokes I've written since I've started. I have a bunch of stuff on my mom, which is weird. My mother passed away February 25th, a couple of months ago. And but I have a lot of jokes about my mom having Alzheimer's. So I got to keep her alive for the sake of the jokes. So nobody knows my mother really passed away. I still do the jokes. It's about 20 minutes. So it will be about what I went on with cancer, which is from how I knew I was sick, to the tests that they run, to surgery, to chemo, to my mental state and things you think about. So I do it chronologically. Like, here's my journey of cancer, from first day I got sick, to all the tests, to surgeries, to where I am today. And I talk a lot about that, but that's why I call it getting my affairs in order. It's just a fancy thing I like to say when people call me. You sound very important when you say I'm getting my affairs in order. So
right.
That's coming soon. 85% of it I have. I hope you guys don't hear that. I live in an apartment complex, and they're vacuuming my hallway right now.
Nope, don't hear it.
Yeah. I've been here for a year. I've never heard them vacuum before. They picked this time to, of course, decide to vacuum my hallway. Incredibly loud. So yeah, that's it. I want to talk about what I've gone on with me being sick and put it out there. And I'm braver on a special, as opposed to just performing in front of a regular live crowd for a one-time show. There's no immediate feedback on a special. You throw it up on the internet, right, and then people watch it. So if they're offended by you, who cares?
Right.
When they're offended by you in person, you have to have a confrontation. People heckling you, waiting for you at the bar after the show. That's not funny. Cancer's not funny. You shouldn't joke about.
Just ask Chris Rock about that, huh?
That's happening a little bit. It's getting more people coming to this. It's not a lot, but I saw some stories
Wow.
about some people coming to the stage.
Really?
Yeah, that's not a lot, but it's
Wow.
happening. People think they have a right to not be offended.
Yeah.
People are like, I'm offended. I go, okay, sorry.
And
Do you have a right to not be offended now? I go, plus there's 300 people here. The other 299 had a great time.
yeah, I always wonder
there
what
was, like-
happened. When I was a kid, I was told sticks and stones can break your bones. Words can never hurt you. Well, unless you choose, it's like, I don't know. I don't understand it.
Just nonsense. But that's where we're going. I'm a relatively clean comic. I'm not a very edgy comic. I mean, I do jokes about my mother, but I'm not making fun of Alzheimer's. I'm talking about my experience taking care of her.
Yeah.
And when I do cancer jokes, I'm not like, what's up with that cancer? Like, I'm not making fun of cancer. I'm telling my story. And anybody I'm getting the opposite reaction. I'm not getting people who are offended. I'm getting people who have been through it or their family members have been through who come to me afterwards. You asked me about doing comedy and what I like about it. There are comics like Rodney who do jokes. They're not real. They're not him. I don't get no respect. Blah, blah, blah. I like talking about real things because I noticed early on when I was doing jokes about Dunkin' Donuts, people go, oh, I like that Dunkin' Donuts joke. And they go home.
Yeah.
Now it's holy cow, man. I took care of my mother for 4 years. That joke about Medicaid you told. And they want to have a beer with me at the bar. There's a connection. And you can feel it on stage. When I'm talking about being sick, I can look at the audience. When I first started doing this, talking about having cancer, I didn't know what reaction I'd get. And I wasn't as good at it then. I was kind of figuring out, how do I talk about this? And I would do it. And I'd see like a husband and wife or a couple sitting in the front row. And I'd see like the wife reach over and grab the husband's hand and squeeze it. And I'd be like, one of them had cancer. Yeah. I could just tell by and they weren't laughing. They were getting sad. Like I was triggering like memories. And I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to make this people to be like, oh, I recognize that. Yeah, I remember doing that, and try to get them to just laugh. So it's you figure it out. You figure it out. But that's my favorite thing about doing comedy is to talk about something real and have an actual connection with an audience, which is Chris Rock does it, and again the guys I mentioned before. George Carlin used to do it, even if he didn't make me laugh. I was always just so. I can listen to George Carlin for 3 hours, and even if I didn't laugh once, I'm just fascinated by what he's saying.
Right.
If you understand what I mean, he was more than just a more than just a stand-up. The guy was a prophet in a way.
You're right, John, because people who look at these comedy, if they're making fun of something, it's usually because they've lived through it. It's something personal. The comic, I mentioned my uncle had passed away from pancreatic cancer, and as he got more infirm, he would crack jokes about his situation. Sometimes the family sitting there on his bed, and he would say something, and it was just like, wait, what? And just kind of laugh like, wow, only he could get away with saying. So I'm like, well, when you're not, intimate with stuff like that, I guess, I don't know. I think it's just good insight you're talking about. There's some funny things when you stop to look back and think, yeah, that is kind of funny the way that happened. I think it's healthy to laugh sometimes.
I just tell people, I don't have a big build up to what happened to me. Like I'll do like 20 minutes of jokes, about going to the Chinese restaurant or whatever joke I have, buying a new mattress, like, these observational jokes.
Yeah.
And then I'll just kind of transition very quickly into, so I got sick last year and I was diagnosed with, people are kind of like it's not a big, and then I just tell them, like, don't awe me, like, don't awe, it's fine. Like it is, like, I don't want a big, oh, are you okay? Like, I'm like, I'm not. Like it's pancreatic cancer. I don't think okay is the good word, but I'm like, I'm fine. Like, let's just talk about it. Like, you don't have to awe me for 20 minutes. So you figure it out. But I really idolize those comics who can talk about things like that in a very smart way. And some of the people I mentioned, I keep mentioning the same ones because they're my favorites. I give a shout out to Nate Bargatze right now as a comic that's just blown up. And he's probably my favorite comedian right now, who just talks about regular stuff. Just 3-minute stories about the most mundane thing. And you're like, how did he make that so funny?
Yeah.
It's just a story about him. Yeah, it's an art. It's a craft, and he's extremely good at it. He's like really on it because he's the guy that I would look at and go, if I had to emulate anybody, or if there's somebody whose style I think I'm closest to, it would be like a Nate Bargatze. He's just better at it than me. There's a guy named Joe List, who I just love his style of comedy. like what he does. I just really, I connect to, that's what I would want to do, what he does. His comics I love, but they're not me.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Like Brian Regan's a very physical comic.
He is.
I don't move a lot. I'm a very, a lot of facial expressions, but you can shoot my comedy special right in that box. I don't move. I'm never going to go out of frame. Brian Regan's
he's all over the stage.
Facial expressions all over the stage.
Yeah.
And it just, the physicality makes it so much funnier. He can do it. The jokes are really good, but also he sells it physically.
Yeah.
But
not everyone can pull it off.
No, different styles. Like I used to open a lot for, I did about 25 shows with Sebastian Maniscalco, if you know who he is, but he's one of the biggest comics in the world. He sells at Madison Square Garden. Huge.
Okay.
Incredibly animated though. It's the complete opposite of me. And it's really interesting to like watch how choreographed those moves are. Like I did a bunch of shows with him, so I'd watch him come out and be like, man, he's all over the stage. Then I'd watch the next show. I go, he's all over the stage, but it's exactly like those moves are almost like a choreographed dance. It's not just a random him jumping around. It's really interesting to watch. Such a different style than what I have. But that's why I love comedy. Everybody finds their own voice.
Yeah,
that's right. So John, where can people find you? And if you want to talk a little bit about your upcoming documentary again, just to
it's it'll be at Governor's Comedy Club on Long Island. It's Saturday, May 21st. We're close to sold out already, which is flattering. The place holds about, I have to remove some seats for cameras because they're going to put 5 cameras in there. So I got to cut some tables out. So probably about 280 tickets, 280 seats will hold. And I think I've sold like 220 already.
Wow.
So it's going to sell out 100%. So I'll be there May 21st. And that's really my main focus. I have a bunch of other shows, but they're not important to me right now. And I think, who said they were in Utah? Who lived in Utah?
I did when I was a kid. Yeah.
I live in Atlanta. I'll be doing Park City, Utah, August 3rd and 4th. There's a theater there called the Egyptian Theater. Oh,
okay. Yeah, I know where that is.
I know it.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'll be staying in Park City, and it's a double headliner show, which is just this is how funny this business is. I don't know the other headliner, but I always want to know who I'm working with. So his name is Brad Upton. He's from I think Nashville, and he's older than me. So I look him up, and there's something called Dry Bar Comedy. It's a clean website of comedy, and he shot a dry bar, and he has the record for most views from a dry bar comedy. So I looked it up, and he has 175 million hits.
Wow.
From his special. Wow. So I read his bio, and it's just crazy, 175 million hits. And it goes on and on. And then I get to my bio, and he's like, real funny guy, keep an eye out for him. Like, that's it. Like, his was this long. So we're dual headliners. But that'll be first week of August. I'll be in Park City, Utah, which I'm looking forward to. I heard it's a beautiful. I've never been. I've been to Provo. I shot a dry bar special in Provo, Utah, which is nice.
Wow. Provo of all places.
Yeah.
Well, it's a dry bar is kind of a Mormon. It's a very religious based.
Yeah.
You have to be squeaky clean.
Jeff Allen's appeared there, and a number of comics, I guess, have appeared there in Provo.
It's a big comedy following there.
Yeah.
If you're clean, it helps to be clean. Yeah. Like Brian Regan's their poster child.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a college town, right?
It was great. I was only there for a couple of days, but I enjoyed it. You always fly into Salt Lake.
That's right.
It seems to be the hub.
Yeah.
Salt Lake, not so wholesome as I thought it would be. Like, I thought it was like, oh, it's Salt Lake City. It's going to be all Mormons. I walked in. I'm like, oh, are those hookers? Like, what's going on here? Like, Salt Lake is not. It's a city.
It's a city. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's a city.
You'll enjoy Park City. Beautiful in the mountains.
Yeah.
I don't really do social media. I mean, I'm on Facebook. I need to start it. I'm going to start an Instagram thing after my special because I have to be on Instagram. Reluctantly, they broke me. But I do a website. It's just johnzieglercomedy.com. It has all my dates, and it has a clip of me up there and some other, my old podcasts and stuff. I used to have a podcast. I had to stop because my COVID hit, and my friend wouldn't let me in his house to do the podcast. So we stopped it. And then he had a baby, and now that's the end of him. But awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great having you on this podcast, John. I was wondering, you want to leave us with a minute or two of some of your comedy routine?
Well, that's probably
Spot.
awkward and uncomfortable.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
Stand-up doesn't always translate through a Zoom box.
No.
So well. During the pandemic, this is what we had. Comedy,
Yes.
especially, I'm in New York. New York was 100% shut down. There was zero comedy. But
Yeah.
so I had to earn some money. So I would do like Zoom shows where I'd do like 40 minutes.
No
And I'd be
way.
like, do I sit? Do I stand? I had a backdrop. I mean, you try to make it as best
Oh.
as you can, but there's no feedback.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
sometimes I'd have, like, we have our 3 heads here. I'd have 150 heads. And some people don't mute themselves. I was doing one and I looked and the guy was like in his underwear, like making an omelet. And he had his iPad like on the kitchen counter. He was just like making an omelet. And I'm like, this is brutal. So
Yeah.
I promised myself after the pandemic, I go, I will never do stand-up on Zoom ever again.
Wow.
It was
Fair enough.
Worst audience ever.
it's all we had. And you know what?
Yeah.
Some people enjoyed it. I mean, they were cooped up in their houses too.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need a break from just watching Netflix. Like you wanted to be around comedy. Governors actually bought huge screens, and I did a Zoom show from the governor's stage. So I actually did stand up in the comedy club. There's no audience, there's no people. I Zoomed my show from the comedy club, and they have 3 giant screens. So I can see that those were like 400 people, and I can see all the heads on these screens. But we had to mute them because you couldn't control. It's too many people.
That's right.
Yeah.
People were just like, you'd be doing your stand up, and I'd hear, Carrie, do we have sugar-free syrup? Like I can hear it in the background. And I'm like, oh, they don't know. I hear everything. So we just had a mute phone. So I was doing stand up to silence.
Yeah.
I would just tell a joke. I'd be like, oh, 40 for $1.99. And then you just wait like 4 seconds. I go, I hope they're laughing. Like, I don't know what's happening. It was pretty tough.
So tough.
Wow.
It was pretty tough. So
Yeah.
being in front of live audiences again, which it hasn't been that long, to be honest. In New York, it's probably been 6 months, 8 months. Like it hasn't been like that long since we've been back. And even when we came back, we had another I don't know the name of them anymore. It was another like variant.
Yeah.
And around January, which I remember New Year's Eve shows they were canceled. Like, so it's like things have only really gotten back to normal in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
So it feels good. I miss being able to do it, and hopefully it lasts. Hopefully.
For sure.
Well, hey, thanks again for joining us today. You have made us laugh.
I appreciate it. This was fun.
We appreciate the insight, and hopefully our listeners have learned a lot about your experience. And for those that are listening to the podcast, it will be available in the next couple of weeks. So head over to quityourcrappyjob.com. And you can also find us on Twitter at quitcrappyjob. And there's @quit. Scott, what is it?
Yes.
Quit
Crappy Job.
I always have a hard time remembering the Twitter handle. Anyway, thanks for joining us today, and we appreciate your time. Good luck to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you, John. Thank you for joining us today. Listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter @QuitCrappyJob. Find us on YouTube @QuitYourCrappyJob. Contact us at quityourcrappyjob@gmail.com. Music is provided by Kelton Levitt. You can reach that kelton.levitt@gmail.com.